No one saw this coming. Out of all the featherweights to step forward, Ilia Topuria was the last person fans expected to challenge the UFC's lightweight elite, let alone hint at facing Khabib Nurmagomedov. Yet here we are, watching the MMA world buzz with speculation over whether Topuria's bold moves will change the landscape at 155. It's not just about adding another contender to the weight class. It's about a rising star who's willing to rattle the entire division and possibly call out a retired legend in the process. But how did this situation even begin? And why are names like Islam Makhachev and Khabib tied to it so closely? Let's dive into the details that have everyone so riled up. But before we do, don't forget to subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. What set off this chain of events was Topuria's clear struggle with the 145 lb limit. He's consistently said the weight cut was brutal, and that making featherweight was becoming an uphill battle with each passing fight. Despite his success and hype at 145, he started hinting long before it was made official that he was eyeing a move north. Many brushed it off as simple bravado at first, but then his manager confirmed what the rumors suggested. Topuria was serious about testing himself at lightweight, not just against any random fighter but against the biggest names possible. And that's where everything shifted from mild curiosity to outright controversy. Topuria's camp argued that if he's going to sacrifice time and energy moving up, he might as well chase the top dogs. And in today's UFC, the top dogs at 155 include Islam Makhachev, Charles Oliveira, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, and on a mythical level, Khabib Nurmagomedov. Of course, Khabib retired undefeated, so hearing Topuria and his team mention Khabib's name was enough to make every MMA forum explode. Some fans saw it as a sign of disrespect, calling it clout chasing or cheap publicity. Others praised Topuria's hunger and fearless attitude, thinking, hey, if you're going to dream, dream big. Either way, the drama had begun. But how did Khabib himself get pulled into this given he's been away from competition for years? Well, it wasn't entirely Topuria's doing. Media members kept prodding the question. If Ilia wants a big fight, do you think Khabib would ever come back? People forget that Khabib, though retired, remains very present in the MMA world. He coaches mentors and corners fighters, especially Islam Makhachev. So when Topuria's call-outs and interviews started circulating, journalists naturally wanted Khabib's take. Khabib's response, while not shocking to those who follow him closely, still stirred the pot. He basically said if Topuria really wants a shot at Islam, he'd better go through a handful of top contenders first.
If he move up and he beat somebody like Dustin Poirier or Charles Oliveira, he's next. Why not? Because there is nobody.
And if there's one thing we know about Khabib, it's that he doesn't mince words. He finds it borderline disrespectful when a rising featherweight demands an immediate crack at the lightweight throne. That leads us to the point of Islam Makhachev's frustration. He already went through the ordeal of fighting Alexander Volkanovski, a fellow champion from featherweight. Although Islam won, critics claim it was too close, or that Islam only beat a smaller guy moving up. Even after the victory, many downplayed the accomplishment instead of celebrating it. Now imagine hearing that yet another featherweight star this time Topuria wants to jump up and challenge Islam Makhachev. It's déjà vu. He's annoyed that no matter how many times he beats top-tier challengers, people try to discredit him by pointing out weight differences or claiming his opponents are just blown-up featherweights.
Okay, I beat the Volkanovski twice. People still say, you're a bit small guy, he's not your weight division.
His perspective is that negativity overshadows the reality that most top fighters walk around well above their fight weight anyway. Still, the narrative persists. Adding to Islam's frustration is his own ambition. He's not content with one title, defense, or a single highlight reel. He wants to cement his legacy on par with his mentor Khabib, or even surpass him if that's possible. As soon as word of Topuria's call-out reached him, Islam's immediate feeling was that it's another potential pitfall. If he beats Topuria, people will say he's picking on someone smaller. If he loses that, tarnishes his belt and momentum. So from Islam's point of view, there's no real win in this scenario unless the UFC sweetens the deal or mandates it in a way that benefits him professionally and financially. He'd do it if it's worth his time, but he's not going to chase after a featherweight who's never fought a top 10 lightweight. Meanwhile, the UFC and Dana White stand at the center of this. They have to weigh the pros and cons of booking a blockbuster clash that could break pay-per-view records against the possibility of alienating fighters who've done the groundwork in the division. Historically, the UFC only occasionally likes a media champ versus champ or super fights if they see big dollar signs. However, White has also expressed many times that he doesn't want to clog up divisions with these cross-weight matchups. He looks at the calendar, sees multiple PPV events needing headliners, and wonders if handing out super fights left and right does more harm than good. The big question is, does Topuria have the star power to generate a massive buy rate at 155 especially? Compared to someone like Charles Oliveira or Dustin Poirier? Possibly yes, possibly no. At the very least, the conversation around him is hot, and hype can be turned into revenue if the UFC markets it right. Outside of the fighters and promoters, you have the media swirl. Ariel Helwani weighed in describing the situation with a mix of intrigue and skepticism. He pointed out that Topuria had struggled with weight cuts for a while, so a move up is logical, but that doesn't automatically mean Islam or Khabib has to entertain his demands.
He moves up and fights Islam, and if it doesn't go his way, and of course it can, I don't know what the odds are, but Islam is that damn good.
Ariel has often said the UFC brass might be slow to grant another featherweight star a chance at the 155 champion so soon, especially with plenty of lightweight contenders waiting. Still, Ariel also mentions that if the fans want it, and if it promises enough excitement, Dana White has been known to pull the trigger on fights that don't perfectly align with the division's rank-and-file system. Then you have Chael Sonnen, who never misses a chance to offer a pointed opinion. True to form, Chael called it the same old narrative of smaller champions testing bigger waters.
Like there is something about a champion who just absolutely cannot protect his division.
Volkanovski just did it. Conor McGregor did it years ago, and the results have been a mixed bag. Chael questions if Topuria is merely chasing clout and immediate title shots without going through the usual route of beating a few top 10 or top 5 lightweights. Sonnen underscores that Khabib's name is always catnip for attention. According to Chael name-dropping, the undefeated legend is the fastest way to spike headlines. But is it genuine ambition or a strategic ploy to get coverage? That's the million-dollar question, and one that keeps fans tuning in to see how it unfolds. From the coaching side, Javier Mendez, Islam's trainer, has repeatedly stated that Islam will fight anyone as long as the UFC sets it up properly. He respects Topuria's skills, but points out that it's not Islam's job to greet every featherweight who decides to jump weight classes. At the same time, Mendez says if the UFC put the paperwork in front of Islam and said sign here to fight Topuria, there's zero chance Islam backs away. It's more about principle and timing than fear or concern. Makhachev already showed willingness to face one of the pound-for-pound best Volkanovski, so another skillful 145er wouldn't scare him. But as Mendez puts it, Islam wants the credit he deserves for beating whoever they put in front of him rather than dealing with endless debates over whether these challengers truly belonged in the same ring. For Ilia Topuria, the stakes couldn't be higher. He's already drawn a line in the sand by publicly proclaiming he can take on the best at 155. If he does indeed get Islam in the cage, imagine the ripple effect if he pulls off an upset. That would immediately cement him as one of the most dangerous men in the UFC, rewriting the narrative of smaller featherweight versus larger lightweight. On the flip side, if he moves up and stumbles badly, he'll get labeled as just another hype train that crashed upon a rival. That kind of blow can set a fighter's career back years. It's all or nothing, which is part of the intrigue-fueling fan discussions. From Islam Makhachev's angle, defending his belt against yet another ex-featherweight champion or contender can feel like a lose-lose. If he dominates Topuria in a few rounds, critics will say, of course, he beat a man who spent most of his career at 145. If the fight's competitive, or worse, if Islam falls short, he loses a ton of momentum and possibly the belt. So you can see why Islam's fans and training partners bristle whenever Topuria's name comes up. Ultimately, it's Topuria who stands to gain the most here. He's the hunter, by consistently calling out Islam or even throwing Khabib's name around. He's made himself a talking point in multiple divisions. He's made it clear he doesn't want a stay-busy fight at lightweight. He wants the top of the mountain. Confidence like that can be a double-edged sword. It draws admirers who love a gutsy attitude, but also invites scorn from purists who believe you should climb the ranks the traditional way. If and when the UFC finalizes a contract for Topuria's first big fight at 155, it'll be the moment of truth. Maybe the promotion sets him up against a gatekeeper or a big name like Dustin Poirier. If he wins in dominant fashion, the noise for a title shot will become deafening. On the sidelines, Khabib Nurmagomedov continues living his retired life, yet his influence lingers. Whether or not he ever laces up the gloves again, which he said he won't, his opinions can shape matchmaking decisions behind the scenes. Islam trusts Khabib's judgment. The UFC likes having Khabib's star power around events, and fans still speculate about what if, even if Khabib is famously steadfast about never returning to competition. So every mention of Khabib's name in the context of a new challenger becomes a headline. That's free publicity for Topuria, who's more than willing to use it to his advantage. By now, all eyes are waiting to see what Dana White announces next. If the UFC books Islam against another lightweight contender like a Charles Oliveira,